right, guys, welcome to the Bearzi podcast. Today is episode 53 with my friend Josh from the Beneath the Surface YouTube channel. Josh is a content creator who I've been wanting to have on the podcast since January 2022. I don't know if you remember that. So thanks for coming on the podcast, Josh.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a while. Yeah. At the time, I'll be honest with you, Derek, I had been doing business-oriented podcasts, marketing type stuff, and I got burned out. I'm like, I really don't like those. I don't like what people are doing out there with them, and it just wasn't helping me. So I'm like, but as the channel progressed, I had something different to say, and so the whole scope of doing something like this changed. And so you coming back and asking me, do you want to do it, a year plus later, it suddenly made a lot of sense. So here we are. I don't feel as I did before.
Let me give a little context to the relationship that we have. So I think in the middle of January 2022, I got an email from you completely out of the blue. I remember you would comment on some of my videos from time to time. And then you messaged me saying, "Hey, Derek, I started a YouTube channel," and you sent me a link to your video and I would love for you to check it out. And I was like, "Oh, cool. This is awesome." And then I clicked the link and I believe you had 14 subscribers at the time.
Yeah.
But the quality of the video for the first video of a channel was nowhere near like a 14 subscriber channel. We're talking about like super high picture quality, cinematics, visuals, storytelling, like amazing stuff for the first video on your channel. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And so for anyone that is wondering the type of content you make, you were originally moving from, I believe, Portland, Oregon, and you went to Portugal, then eventually ended up in France. Is that correct?
Right. That's the trajectory. Yeah. The first video you saw, which was the first video on the channel, was the trip I took with Nathan, my son Nathan, to Iceland. And so there's a whole backstory that I could tell about how I even know you to begin with, that you might be curious.
Oh, okay.
So you did something on Nathaniel Drew being gone for 30 days a couple of years ago. I don't know if that video is still on your channel. I couldn't find it, but I don't know if you've taken it.
It's still there. It's an old one.
Yeah. And so my younger son, Skylar, and you might know who he is. He's done a lot of the animation work for Nathan. Noticed that video and commented about it to the family. And so I went and I checked it out and I'm like, oh, how cool is that? Right. And, I felt your energy right at that moment. Like, wow, this guy is just expressing his appreciation for this person and what it's like to not have them around for a month. And I left a comment. I remember leaving a comment. I don't remember what I said. And so I think I would check out your channel from time to time, and then fast forward to me publishing and wanting to get some views initially. And so I reached out to you and I said, hey, check it out. I was sort of doing outreach to anybody I could, people I knew. And that sort of triggered this sort of email relationship. And then you would show up and leave some nice comments to my videos. And I don't know, just, one thing led to another. And here we are. So thought you might.
Wow, that's super
get
cool.
A kick out of those details.
Yeah. So I do follow both of your son's work. Your Sky's channel is Skymography, I believe. Like he has a super amazing like digital animation, like Adobe After Effects stuff, like super cool. Because I'm really into that too, but I kind of suck. The funny thing about that video was when I was starting YouTube, I really struggled because I felt that in order to be successful on YouTube, you had to have this extremely energetic, extroverted personality where you're like high energy and you're talking to the camera and you're like, hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to my YouTube channel. And that personality for me is very fake because I am more mundane. I don't have a super exciting voice. I'm kind of dull in a sense in the way that I speak. And so when I found your your son Nathan's channel, it was very refreshing to me because I saw this guy who sort of was just who he was. He didn't have that Logan Paul, like Jake Paul, like personality, like where they're like sort of bleeding this like fake. I don't know what you call it. I know that type of personality gets you views and clicks. And
Yes.
so your
Yes.
son had this channel that did the complete opposite to that. And that's what I really respected. And he made a video, like you said, you know, taking a break for 30 days. And I noticed there's all these people in his comment section like, oh no, don't go. You know, we miss you. Like the YouTube algorithm is going to crush your channel if you leave. And I was
Right.
like, huh, that's sort of interesting. But I also wanted to, again, I was very appreciative of his channel because it helped me just accept my own authentic voice. I didn't have to have this fake persona every time I was on camera.
Right. 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 And you know, by the way, I wanna say that you don't have a dull, boring voice. The way I would describe you, you feel very grounded. You have a soothing voice. You're someone that actually carries very well in front of the camera in a way that I struggle with. Okay. And you seem natural. You engage with that natural sort of grounding energy. So that's my feedback to you. And for me, for my channel, it's like I also don't strive to be this high energy anybody, because I'm not. I'm this sort of oddball on YouTube. I'm this guy in his 50s. I'm not into big effects. I'm not into being loud. That's not me anymore. And so it just goes back to be yourself, right? If you're going to put out any content, just be yourself. Let that be your authentic presentation to the world, and you can be successful. You don't have to do what others are doing. And yes, the sort of hyped up stuff does get views. Yes, these people make a lot of money because they're wacky, they're getting attention. But if that's not authentic to you, then it doesn't really matter. So my take on content.
You know what else too I've noticed that whenever you build a tribe of people, especially your subscribers, they're really good at sniffing out bullshit and they can really tell when you're being fake and inauthentic. And I really noticed that. And I had a couple friends and subscribers sort of call me out on a couple of videos where I was becoming robotic. I have this sort of attachment for my camera lens where it's this like diagonal mirror, so it acts as like a teleprompter, and I can put my phone like this below the lens, and I have this script, like just like a teleprompter appearing um,
Right, right.
whenever I'm recording a YouTube video. I received some feedback from some friends about this sort of robotic way that I was creating videos. And what was happening was I would write out a full script, like a 4-page script for a YouTube video, and then I'd read it off the teleprompter sentence for sentence. And it was sort of like my perfectionism coming out because I wanted to make the most polished, mistake free YouTube video possible. And I didn't want to have any of these mess ups of like the ums and the uhs and the likes, in those sort of filler words you have in your sentences when you don't know what to say. And the problem with doing that is that people really notice that I was being inauthentic. And I feel like one of the best things for YouTube is just sharing your authentic self. And this is sort of a perfect segue into a question that I wanted to ask you. I don't know if you remember this, but in the very first email you sent me, you said you were trying to overcome the fear and exhilaration of posting your first YouTube video. So, what does that feeling feel like now that you finally conquered that and got the channel started?
Um, it's always exciting to post. I would say there's always an excitement around. We all wonder, how's the next video going to do. I've had a few very successful videos, very unexpectedly, because you can't predict what's going to happen. I hit some spots for my age group and what have you that just sort of clicked for people. And so that was great. But now every video I publish, there's a big question mark. Like, is this going to be get a good number of views? Is the sponsor going to be happy because I'm getting sponsors now? There's kind of that anxiety around it a little bit. Um, I am still, I'm still a nervous wreck in front of the camera. I don't, I don't love the day when I have to record. I'm also somebody who'll script out everything because that's how I get my thoughts together. I don't use a teleprompter because that does trip me up and make me sound too stiff. But I do pull the lines from the script and I'm delivering them as either voiceover or on camera. But you can see the difference between me presenting and me when I'm vlogging and I've got my phone and I'm just on the spot, you know, talking because I'm talking freely. So um, I've decided not to make a big deal out of it. It's who I am. It's where I'm at right now. I mean, Nathan tells me that years ago, for him, if you look at his work early on, he was also very caught up on a serious delivery on camera and getting it right. And then fast forward to now, he's like smiling all the time. He says, pretend you're talking to someone, and I've tried it, but it's still tough for me to sound, as natural as I would like. But I don't, like I say, I don't let that be a big deal. I try to be, through my script and what I'm saying and what I'm showing, be as real as I can, and I think that comes through. And in the end, like you say, if you're being as authentic as you can about what you're doing, then it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to be this perfect presenter person. But of course, yeah, when if you're tied to a script and you're trying to read it word for word and deliver it in a way that's unnatural, then that can definitely get in the way. So
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like, especially if you come from like a filmmaking, videography type of background, there's this level of quality that you want to put out in your work. But at the end of the day, I sort of forget that, it's YouTube and it's just like a YouTube video. It doesn't have to be this perfectly polished, cinematic movie theater type video every upload. But, I think that sometimes I sort of forget that. But now that you are in sort of like a rhythm and you've been posting a couple of videos, another question I sort of wanted to ask you was, how are you with dealing with criticism and negativity, especially in the comment section when it comes to being a YouTube creator?
we were talking about that a little bit earlier. It's actually, how do I say this? It's quite a topic, isn't it? Um, People out there in the world, I mean, in social media, you can say things that you would normally not say in normal social settings, right? Social media is not very social in the sense of how we normally relate to each other, right? And so um, there's a lot of freedom for those who are, um, how do I say this? Those who have a lot to say that is not positive, right? They're gonna lay it on the table because it's safe. It's safe to say nasty things from behind your keyboard at home, right? And so how does it affect me? I mean, I don't like seeing it. I mean, who does? And so what I have to do is I have to limit my exposure in the end to comments. Like I was telling you earlier, in the beginning few days or week, comments can be very positive. It's the people that typically follow you, those who are interested in your topic. As time goes on, I've seen comments deteriorate to the point where you're like, wow, it's like people can get really mean, and I don't need that energy. I don't need to expose myself the way that if I'm on the street or dealing with someone, I'm not going to take verbal abuse. What you do is you walk away. So the way to do it on the internet in any kind of exchange scenario is you have to be careful how much you're consuming it. I do it for a few days when I post because I want to incentivize the algorithm, right, to show engagement. But like I was telling you, after 2, 3, maybe 4 days, I cut out. And part of me is dying to know how the video is doing, right? You want to know, you want to see stats, but I have to hold myself back and say, look, at the end, any kind of tracking is unhealthy, really. And what you're doing is you're trying to feed off good news, right? You want to see numbers go up. You want to see that people love you, and you're feeding your ego in a way that's so unhealthy. So it's been a matter of personal practice to be as good as possible, to not look at anything between videos after those initial few days, not to look again. So but the impact as a person, yeah, of course it gets you. It's like you want everyone to love you, and when they get mean, people can get extra mean, and it's like, wow, people have that capacity to get really nasty online.
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important topic to talk about because I've had a bunch of YouTubers on my podcast who are a lot younger than me and you, like 19, even one guy that was like 16, I think, 20, 21.
Mm,
Like, young. YouTube is generally a young person's game, right?
right.
And the common problem that a lot of them have is dealing with negativity and these toxic comments that you get in on YouTube videos. And luckily for me, I'm someone who has received criticism generally my entire life, whether it was dropping out of school or starting a business or just my whole path, my whole trajectory in life has been full of criticism, especially from people that I love. And so I've sort of developed this very thick skin when it comes to YouTube comments. And it's one aspect that doesn't really bother me too much, but I definitely think it's important to talk about because I know there's a plethora of content creators and people out there who are struggling with this issue. And generally, I heard a great piece of advice from Joe Rogan once, and he said, what you want to do is just post and ghost. And if you don't see it, it's not going to bring your mood down in any way. But the problem with that is you also want to build up your tribe of people and connect with them in an authentic way. And replying to their comment and clicking that heart button, it makes a lot of people feel good. So it's sort of like this strange balance that you're trying to play, right? Like you want to build up your audience, you want to be supportive of them, taking time out of their day to leave a comment for you, but also you don't want to be in there too long where it affects your mental health, and all of a sudden you spiral out of control into like sadness or depression or anxiety, where now you're like one of those thumb warriors where you're battling people in the comment section all day, because that's not healthy. That's not a healthy way to live. So I think this topic is extremely important for maybe a couple older guys like me and you to sort of talk
Mm.
about and maybe offer some tips up to the younger generation, because I know, especially with social media, like imagine being like a 19, 20, 21 year old adolescent, like going through the world, and you have to deal with this type of stuff. I know my younger self, I probably would have went crazy, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's quite a thing. It has to do with our society consuming ravenously. I mean, there's a way that we just want to eat everything's so accessible. We just want to eat it in large quantities, and it's so easy to be mindless about it because you're not paying attention to those potato chips that you're sticking in your face, to the kind of things that you're putting into your head, right? That are there. I mean, I work with somebody. I've talked about therapy. I work on a weekly basis and do a lot of work on myself, my internal self, on it for years now. And he reminds me that before bedtime, it's so important to be mindful of what you're putting in your head. Like, what are the last things you're doing before you go to sleep? Are you on your phone? Are you scrolling through crap? Are you watching TV? Or are you taking in maybe a book that is something spiritual or something soothing, something grounding? Are you listening to quieting music? And so I have to remind myself to do that, as often as possible before I go to bed, because you take that with you, that affects your sleep, and that's what you wake up with. And so it's really interesting how, um, for young people now, it's the way to keep up with stuff and to connect. And it's so alluring. It's so tempting that it feels inescapable. It's not. You just have to know yourself, and you have to be good at not letting it control you. And it's going to get worse if we get on the topic of AI. if you'd like, it's going to get worse.
Yeah, man, I'm seeing like the AI, artificial intelligence thing everywhere. And I know you're sort of in the real estate game right now as you've been moving, but I'm someone who is always looking into real estate, what's property values like, where can I live, should I move, should I buy, should I sell? And now over here in Canada, every single posting in real estate is generated by AI. And you can tell because at the bottom of each listing, if you scroll down to the bottom, it says powered by Chat GPT. And that
Mhm.
little description, which sort of talks about the property and what's nice, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. That's all generated by AI now. Like our real estate agents, they don't even type up like, oh, very spacious, 3 bedroom, 3 bath, semi detached home in the heart of blah, blah, blah. Like it doesn't do that anymore. You have this very, very scripted, very AI generated message that it's almost like a robot now, and everything is becoming robotic. And I'm sort of conflicted on the AI thing because it's taking over a lot of video editing jobs, which is sort of a
Mm,
space that I'm in or used to be
mm.
in. And I remember watching a video the other day of this AI take like a 1 hour podcast and chop it up in like 45 seconds. It switched all the camera angles and it just like it worked on the Adobe timeline in like less than a minute and it had the whole thing done. Where I'm like, wow, if I were to edit a podcast like that, it takes me over an hour to switch between cameras and cut out stuff like, cut out the footage or cut out the white noise. And so the AI thing is something that I am very aware of, but also I think it's a technology that's here to stay. And I think the wrong decision would be to write it off entirely. And I'm sort of trying to figure out ways, how can I use it? How can it help me in some way? Can it help me save time on, making YouTube videos or editing? So I'm not entirely sure. I'm still conflicted on the whole AI thing.
Yeah. No, it's definitely becoming a serious part of our lives. I heard about that tool to help you edit podcasts. It's pretty insane. Um, I just think it's going to be in our lives in so many different ways. And it's, what I was alluding to before, that's a little bit scary because there are some seriously scary aspects to AI that we don't even understand yet. And that is the understanding of data points and of people's particular ways of being so that it can present to you precisely what's going to sell to you. I know you've done a lot around gambling, and one example that I think I saw it on. There's a documentary called Coded Bias. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, but it talks about from a few years ago. It talks about the impact of AI. Coded Bias. I think it was they were the ones who were talking about, as an example, people who have a tendency to gamble, right? They're going to show you in the perfect fashion. AI will present to you, the appeal repeatedly in just the right way that's going to have that will make people, uh, be weak around, those points in their personality that could be affected and penetrated the most. And so if you don't know yourself, if you're not in charge of you, and you know what is going on in you and working on you, then that external AI will have all the influence in the world. And that scares me for young people and for people in general. It's going to be something that is really going to challenge humanity.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't seen Coded Bias. I'll look it up. But speaking of Netflix, this is something, and this is related to gambling as well. I used to have all these horrible habits, and it's sort of part of my niche or main idea of my channel is try to remove all these negative habits from your life, like the whole self improvement thing. But speaking of Netflix, Netflix is something that I used to watch every single night, and now I've completely removed from my life. Do you have any tips or advice when it comes to balancing your work life with your family life?
Um, that's a good question. trying to think of what do we do that works for us. Life is so different for us now on the road, the way we've been living, even now. Um, you know, eh, and I don't want to give too much away, but finding our future home. We're in transition. We're constantly in transition, and you have to make life work for you the best you can. Um, but I would say that how do I say this? Okay, you just hit me with a complex question here. Um, I think when we are in touch with each other, when we are in a conversation, say a FaceTime call with either of the boys, or we see Nathan a lot more now that we're close to Paris, right? Back and forth. Um, we've done trips together, get-togethers for like the holidays in Paris. We make those things really count. And so when we're connecting as a family in different combinations of people, it just it's quality time. And so that aspect of things is treated in a very open and sort of serious and important way, meaning that we value that time with each other very much. Um, Other than that, if I'm looking at components in my life, there's work. The YouTube channel has become work that I have to attend to, and there's now the pressure of publishing every month. There's the pressure of getting a nice promo spot for a sponsor, and all these things, all these elements of running the channel and whatnot. You know it from all the work you're doing. Um, so work is work, and sometimes the problem is work can blend into like the evening, into the weekend. You don't, I tend to not define my work days very well. But what happens is also on a daily basis, I try to stop a couple times a day and sit quietly. It's um, not in the way of a meditation necessarily, like I used to do years ago, but it's sitting with myself, sitting, connecting to my body, connecting to how I feel. My weekly sessions in therapy are really important to me. They're a way to reorient on a weekly basis with the support of my therapist. But those stopping points during the day are really important. Um, and, um, there's that going on uh, all the time. Every few days, we realize if we've been cooped up too much, let's go for a walk. Let's get out of here. Let's go grab a bite, right? And so I think to answer your question, the best way I would say it is there's a constant assessment for where we are, right? If I haven't talked to one of my sons, okay, I try to rectify that. If I haven't been sitting enough quietly, I get that back on track. If we haven't been out to do something fun, then that gets looked at. It's not like there's a set routine, which is hard to maintain on the road. And I hope to do that in our future home. But a constant, like I talk in my latest video, a constant sort of getting back on the path, if you will. That's been my best way to sort of stay balanced, because it's so easy as a human being, especially with all the stuff we've been talking about, to get distracted, to get off balance. And so it's incumbent on you to find ways to bring it back. And my therapist has said, which is it's a great point. It comes from a guru, and I can't remember who the guru was, but he said the most important thing when you're sitting in a meditation is the majority of it is getting your butt on the chair. Okay, you've conquered so much by sitting down and spending time with yourself. And then the next best thing you can do in any kind of quiet sitting is to bring yourself back, your attention back to what you're doing, because you're going to veer off, right? And so as I answer your question, I'm realizing that that's what I do. I've been doing it for years. And that to me, in the end, is the best thing, because if you get into a locked, sort of disciplined process, I know that for myself, I'll break it somehow. I'll do it for a while and then it'll just get wonky. I'll stop doing something. Or if we take off to Paris for a few days and I come back, suddenly I'm off, right? Routines get broken. And so it becomes that sort of muscle of how do I get back into what's best for me over and over again.
Hmm, that's a good point. I like that getting your butt on the chair is like that's like the main thing. This is an important topic for me because especially when it comes to being a content creator or an entrepreneur or starting any type of business, generally there is this passion for your work, and this is what I'm very guilty of, is that I absolutely love my work. If I take a vacation day from my day job, all I want to do is work on my business, work on my YouTube channel, work on my newsletter, or whatever it is, do something creative. However, at the same time, there is this balancing act that I have to play with my work life and my family life. And I really try to have this open mind and perspective. And I try to look up to people who have been where I'm at. So, say, for example, you have two kids who are in their 20s, I believe.
Yeah.
And I have a daughter who's 3.5 and a son who is 10 months. And so I am trying my hardest to work as hard as I can, be as disciplined as I can, and build up this business so that my family can prosper and I can be home and spend time with them. Also, there's a double edged sword there where if I work too much, then I'm not spending any time with them at all. And then they get neglected. And so when you work a normal job, like a normal 9 to 5, it's like you leave for the office, you drive, you go to work, you come home, and oh, dad's home at 5:30 or 6 or whatever it may be. Now you have until 6, until whatever time to spend time with your family. Whereas when you're doing this content creation stuff, there is no set schedule and work can come and go, and it's sort of like all over the place. And so I always struggle to set boundaries between my work and my family life because that's incredibly important for me. And I had this massive epiphany this past weekend when I went on this trip out west to the mountains with my parents, my wife, and my two kids. And I sort of like just disconnected from my work altogether. My dad asked me, "Oh, you're going to bring your laptop so we can like edit our footage as we go?" I'm like, "No, no, Dad, I'm not going to bring. I'm just going to bring my camera and my phone because I need to, and that's it. I'm going to leave all my work at home." And so I had a full week to just enjoy family time. And it was incredibly refreshing for me. And it was also alarming because I realized that how much time I spend into my work. Like I'm always, there's no days off for me. If I have like a free Saturday afternoon, there's no like Netflix or video games or playing back. Like there's none of that. It's editing. It's writing a script. It's video ideas. It's making a thumbnail, right? It's recording a podcast, doing a
Mhm.
live stream, making a YouTube short. Like there's a plethora of responsibilities that I have on my plate as a content creator. And I feel like you can get lost in that. You could really lose your mind in the madness when it comes to all this stuff, especially when it comes to like the analytics. And I know you know, and I know that you probably can resonate with this as well. Like you look into the analytics tab, you see a video that you've made that's doing poorly, is not getting the views or the traction that you think it deserves. And you're like, hey, what's going on here? And it affects
Mhm.
your mental health in a negative way. And the thing that I don't like about YouTube is that it doesn't reward high quality content. And I think this applies to you, if I'm being honest. Like you'll have this masterpiece of a video that takes you 6 weeks to make, and it won't get the views it deserves. Whereas someone else could, like for me, I can make some random video off the cuff that I record in one shot, takes me 15 minutes, and it could just like blow up. And I've spent such like no time or effort at all into this video. But if it's engaging and the YouTube algorithm likes it, it it can't figure out what is high quality content or not, and it just pushes
Right.
whatever, right? And I sort of
Right.
I sort of hate that about YouTube because it affects my work life and my family life, and I'm always trying to find ways to balance them and keep them in harmony, if that makes any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so a couple of things about that. I think it's all about consciousness and awareness. I mean, let's get down to some real basics, right? If you are mainly when you have time off or what have you, focused on your channel or your content, and that's where your direction is going, right? Um, I don't know how well you're balancing work and family, but I know that when I don't get enough time with my wife or with my kids or even my parents, I don't have the best, like weekly, daily, relationship with my parents, but we talk once a month. I call, and sometimes Cecilia will join me, and it's these lovely, conversations, but they happen once a month. So what I'm trying to say is that if you maintain, for anybody now, content creators and whoever, a constant awareness that of the things that matter to you, then you're going to give them proper attention. So, sitting down to a meal twice a day is important to us. And Cecilia cooks a lot. I'm very lucky. I've talked about this before. Whether it's at home or we're going out to eat, sitting down and having a quality time together where you're having some nice conversation is important. That's part of the daily life, right? And so the same thing when I haven't talked to one of my boys for a few days, there's a consciousness or an awareness around, well, we need to connect. So if they don't call, then I'll make the call or what have you, right? And I think that's the way to kind of deal with this work, fun, family, all these different aspects, self-care, right? You just have to constantly be aware of these things that are important to you. And by doing that, you're going to find ways to find room in your life for them, right? You had said something about content creation. I don't know. I had something else to say, but I'll leave it at that for now. The fact that consciousness, I think when it comes to tracking videos, I just remembered when it comes to a video not performing, or gosh, I put so much time into something and others are doing this crappy, lower quality, just what shock value type content, and you need to have awareness around what you're doing, right? If you're doing it for the love of creating stuff that you love to do, which has to be a focus for me because I put endless hours into this stuff. If I'm proud of the piece I'm putting out, if a lot of love and care and attention went into it, that's satisfying aspect number one. The rest, luckily, a lot of these videos have done well. Luckily, I get to make some money off of them. That's a lot of the icing on the cake, but at the core of it, if you're not happy producing content, anything that you're doing, a job, anything, quit that thing. Just get out of there. Go find what fulfills you, because that thing is what's going to keep you going when the views aren't showing up or what have you, right? You got to love what you're doing. And I got to say, for years, I wasn't doing that. I had my own business. I've been self-employed for a long time. And even then, from one company of mine to the next, things stopped being satisfying. I was letting others be creative, or the work I was doing was not satisfying to me. I'm telling you, finally now, what I'm doing now is the most satisfying, because I took a love of creating family videos, and thanks to Nathan too, who pushed me. He said, do that for the world out there. Put it on a channel. Tell your stories, not just for us in the family of our trip to the UK or whatever. Tell the world these stories. And I did. And it was this brilliant transition into a space that is not without its problems, without its mean comments, without all the things that get into your head. But it's an amazing way to be creative, and I've found a way to just be fully expressive that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's like it's a tough game to play also, because I have these conversations with my friends who don't make content, and I talk about like the struggles that I'm going through with my channel, and they can't relate at all. They have no conceptualization of like what I'm saying, or the struggles that I go through with analytics. But what is interesting is that the reason that I like to talk about this sort of balance between family life and work life is also because As a father, I am trying to create something, or I'm trying to become a person that my children will be proud of. And I'm sure that most dads in the world go through this same phase as well. It's like you want your children to look up to you. You want to be proud of dad. You want, you want to see, you want to be a hero to them. And I've had this relationship with my father my entire life. And I'm incredibly fortunate in this regard because my dad was someone who is incredibly creative. He was a painter and a photographer, but he is colorblind, so he had this clear disadvantage when it came to his work, so he wasn't able to pursue it professionally. And so his way of art was he made a profession switch into culinary, because food at the highest level is a form of art. There is colors, there is plating, there is design, like there's all this creative elements that go into making food. And so it's interesting because I've gone down this creative path not really knowing that he was into the arts really. Like I knew he painted some pictures, and I have some right here behind me. This forest right here is a picture my dad took and then he painted, which is incredible. But it's rekindled this love of this bond that we have, this father son relationship. And especially when we went out on our trip, he was practicing his photography with his Fuji, his XT3, I think is what he has.
Okay.
And I was
Yeah.
practicing my videography with my Sony. And it's cool because there is this bond, this father son bond, right? And I know that you can totally relate to this, especially with your, I think it was Iceland trip with Nathan.
Hmm.
I watched the video. It was super cool. And you had this father son relationship, this bond where you're practicing your creativity, you're expressing your passions in life, and you're sharing this moment in time with this activity that you guys absolutely love. And I can see like the passion oozing out of you. And I think this is incredibly important because I get a lot of messages from young men who don't have father figures in their life, or didn't grow up with a father, or are lacking a male figure or a hero or something like that. And I want to be that for my children. And it's hard because there is no guide on how to be a good dad. There's no path laid out in front of me. There's no 10-step process that I can follow
Right.
to be a good
Right.
father to my son or be a good dad to my daughter. And so it's like, this is why I always seek out people that have like kind of been there, done that. And so I guess the question that I'm sort of alluding to is, do you have any advice for someone like me who is a struggling father who is trying to balance my work, balance my life, but also, become a man that my kids would look up to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I so appreciate that you're looking at it. It starts with wanting to know more about it. Like, what can I do? How can I be my best self in the end, right? Um, I mean, you have a day job, or are you home a lot? What is your situation like?
So I have a day job where I work Monday to Friday. I do about 25 hours a week. And then
Okay.
the videography, YouTube content creation stuff, I do about 35 hours a week.
Okay. Well, the fact that you're home a lot, right? You're not stuck in an office 50, 60 hours a week, makes a huge difference. I mean, when the kids were little, we were, I mean, we did this ourselves, but we were fortunate enough to, my wife and I have both agreed to run our own business and work a lot from home. And we made that happen. You have to make that happen. And so for many years, um, the kids had both of us at home, which is, I think, the best way to handle parenting, to be around your kids as much as possible when they're little. Eventually, we got an office outside the house, but Cecilia stayed home and she was with the boys for a number of years. They always had somebody around them in the house, and I think that's so crucial to parenting. And you have to devote yourself. You can't just be around each other in the house fighting all the time and, rejecting your kids or what have you. You have to be dedicated. Um, yeah, the answer to the part about being the best dad, if you watch the Eisen video, I mean, it took me years to learn a lot of core things about that. And the more work that I do internally, the more that it is about me. I mean, it's about me in any relationship, in any regard with respect to anything out there. And so to be the best person you can, you have to work on yourself. You're not having this agenda to be the best dad, because as I explained in the video, by doing that, I was trying to be some image. I talk this now in several videos, that the more I've tried to maintain an image of some guy that I am, the worse it is, because you're letting the ego activate. You're creating a persona. I got to be cool. I got to be funny. I got to be smart. It's gotten me in trouble so many times because that is not me. And it's not that I can't be funny or smart or what have you, but it's coming from a different place. It's coming from a strategic plan place, right? The head ego place. And what I've learned is the more work I've done on me, the more understanding, realizations of what matters, the more I can be dumb and make mistakes the way I talk in my videos, the better person I can be, because I'm more relaxed. I'm allowing myself to be my own genuine, authentic form of me. And it just translates. People around you will be attracted to you. They'll want to be with you. Your kids will want to be around the most open, connected version of you. And they'll know when you're not. They'll know, especially little ones. They'll know when you're not present. So, so you got to look at yourself internally. What are my resistances? What are my agendas? And it takes, and also, as I've talked in my last video, you've got to give that time. I'm a firm believer in having outside help, any kind of therapy, guru, coach, whatever, you want to call that, but somebody who can help you work on yourself the way that athletes have coaches. I always use that example. No athlete could function and do well. Think about it. No single athlete does not have a coach. So if that's any example, human beings, we're not capable because we have a head and ego. We're too much in ourselves to be able to look at ourselves. And so I believe in outside help, in good therapy that you click with, and in doing it for the rest of your life, because it's not a 3-week or a 3-month thing. It's going to be you working on you the rest of your life. And that will make a difference. That will make you the most real version of you. And that makes you the best husband, the best father, and best content creator, whatever you want to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really like the sports analogy, because the first thing I thought of, it's like LeBron James has a basketball coach. He has a shooting coach. He has a defense coach, right? And we're talking about like one of the greatest basketball players in history who's still
Right.
playing, and who
Right.
is, funny enough, the exact same age as me. Everyone
Mhm.
calls him old, and I'm like, oh man, I'm the same age as LeBron. I'm my athletic prime is in my past, and I'm like, oh, I feel so bad about that. but it,
Yeah.
but it's cool. I appreciate the perspective though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you have to wonder. You have to wonder, how could the best player in the world, but what makes him the best player in the world, right? That he's got such a support system around him that lets people from the outside course correct, help him see things he can't see, help him perfect. And I'm not saying to treat, your humanity as something to make perfect. I think we do that when we try to do self-help and have these rigorous, schedules and things that we do that become too rigid. But I'm talking about this constant work that almost undoes, your mental processes and ego structure as much as possible, because they are getting in the way of you flowing. And so, as a starting point, the coach in sports is a good example, but then you get into this sort of being your own humanness, which is not about being perfect, not about getting as many shots as possible. It's about letting yourself be who you are as much as possible and as freely as possible. You know.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, it's tough because I know you're mentioning the topic of ego. One of my greatest deficiencies as a man is my pride. I am someone who is extremely this extreme level of pride when it comes to anything I do. And I, for the longest time, have always refused help. I want to do everything my way. I don't trust anyone else to do the job. And there's like this pride that I have in my work or anything that I do that always holds me back. And I'm always sort of like in this shell, suppressing people, pushing everyone away. And in one sense, it's got me really far in life because I'm very self-reliant. I've been generally pretty successful my whole life in all aspects. Um, and so I'm very independent, I guess you would say. However, there is this barrier that I have where I find it incredibly difficult to seek external help. And this is something that I've been trying really hard to work on and not let pride and my ego get in the way. And I don't know how you feel about this topic, but one of the biggest breakthroughs that I made in my life was the use of psychedelic mushrooms. And I make videos from time to time on the benefits of psychedelics and how they've improved my life. And I know this is kind of like a controversial topic because in the US, we're talking about a Schedule 1 substance, a drug, which is illegal. However, over here in Canada, it's much more readily accepted as sort of like a medicine. And I would love to get your opinion on this if you have one at all. But I've used psychedelics to reach this level of ego destruction or dissolving the ego. And I've got to a place where I've sort of melted those barriers around me. And now I have become a lot more open to external help and trying to build up that support system like you were saying before. And it's interesting because without psychedelics, I never would have had this transcendent experience. And what generally happens during these psychedelic experiences or trips is that you go through this thing called ego death, and your ego completely dissolves, and you have to face all of your personal biases, all your bullshit, all your prejudices, everything negative about the person who you are, and you are confronted with it, and you can't escape in the moment. You can't end the trip. There is no exit here, emergency exit door that you can take. There's nothing. There's no lever you can pull, and so you are completely vulnerable in the moment. And after I did a couple of these sessions, it really gave me perspective on my life and sort of my shortcomings as a human being, you know. And I think this is incredibly important, especially for men, because we don't talk about this type of stuff usually. Like men usually don't talk about their feelings or their struggles or their mental health or what they're dealing with. You know, this is not something that guys generally talk about, but I think it's becoming more popular, especially with the whole self-improvement movement of trying to become the best person you are. But I think psychedelics has had like a huge positive impact on my life and just breaking down the ego, breaking down those walls that I set up where I wasn't letting anyone come and help me and assist me in any way. And I'm just wondering, do you have any opinions or ideas on that subject?
Um, I haven't gone that route ever in my life. So to me, it's a whole sort of new modern topic, if you will. I know Nathan had an experience with that. And I know that it could be very eye opening. It could be very cathartic in a way. I'm not against it. I don't have an opinion for it or against it. I would caution anyone. Yeah, I mean, I know it's something delicate that you need proper supervision when you're doing, and so if you know what you're doing, great. And if it's helped to crack you open, and you feel like you can receive, somebody better from the outside, then I would say uh, I'm all for it. I would say, okay, take that opportunity now and see how you could work with someone to let more into yourself, in terms of guidance and help and support. Because I think that psychedelics might open a door, but like you said, you're sort of tripping, you're there with that open door. You may not know what to do with that door. So in a sense, you're kind of like, you have this
Mm,
opportunity, but without, you know, guidance, how do you consciously know what to do with this opening? So, and again, I speak without having had the actual experience, so I'm not sure what it provides. I get the opening aspect of it, but ultimately, in my mind, you need to be sitting down with someone on some sort of frequency, or frequent, on some sort of basis, to sort of hash out what's inside of you, what needs to be looked at and worked on, you know?
hmm Yeah, that's true. And also sort of, I guess, getting to this topic of change and self work. There's one thing that I really respect about you and your wife in particular was that you guys made this drastic change in your life, like in your 50s, where you have this absolutely stunning home in like a forest, it looked like in Portland,
Yep.
just amazing,
Yep.
like immaculate, beautiful home. And then all of a sudden you decide to pack it up and move halfway around the world. And I was like, man, this guy is like, you got like your dream home. It looks like it looks amazing. Everything is like, that's like what I aspire to achieve in my life. And I really respected your the decision that you guys made to just take a leap of faith and make this huge change in your life. And so I guess the question I'm trying to get to is that, do you have any advice for people that are thinking about making that big leap, or that change of scenery, or just picking everything up that they've become accustomed to and just taking this giant leap of faith and trying something brand new? Do you have any advice for people that are considering doing something like that?
Um, I think it goes back to awareness around anything, having this sort of consciousness around it. If you keep that idea alive, which we did for a good, it probably took a couple of years, and as we let it build up into this sort of intensity of eventually going to Portugal, really liking what we saw, coming back, deciding to put the house on the market. Uh, you got to let that be a process. And if you're really ready for it, if you're going to be committed to really doing it, that awareness, that conversation, that openness to it will lead you to actually saying, okay, honey, let's do whatever it takes to make it happen. Right. Um, you also need to feel really done with something before you can move on. You have to have that sort of consciousness around, this is feeling done. This isn't working. The boys left the country. I talk about that in my leaving the US video. The house is beautiful, but it's kind of a golden cage. It's like, we don't love where we live. We don't have access to the things we want. We don't have friends and family here. It's a gorgeous house, but is the house going to decide our lives? Does it mean everything? No, it doesn't mean everything. And so, it also presented this incredible opportunity to say, well, after almost a decade, if we sold it, the market is hot, we can make a lot of money, we can exit out of the US and have money to play with. And it just became, by letting go of that one main big attachment, it gave us opportunities to play with life and do things that we were ready to do. So you kind of have to be ready, committed to the change. You have to let it sort of simmer for a while. It might take you a while to convince each other to really make that decision to take the leap. And then it becomes natural to take the necessary steps. Then you're like, okay, I'll do the hard work to put the house on the market, get rid of stuff, ship stuff. It was all a pain in the ass. I mean, we had a lot to worry about, but it was this beginning of an adventure. At that point, we were in it, met some lovely people. It was an exhausting but fun process. And then there we were landing in Paris. And, I mean, it's good that we didn't know all the things that were ahead. I always say, if you know what's coming up and how it's going to unfold, we would do a lot less. Um, but we had to go through Portugal. We had to deal with coming back to the US, do paperwork, go to Mexico. Everything that I've documented was all hard, tiring, achy, expensive, hopping around to then change your mind and say we're going to France to get here and it's winter and we can't find a property. If you look at a script of it, you're like, why on earth would you do this? But you go in with this open intention, and as you let things unfold, it's fine. It's just, again, you can't know too much, and it's good that we don't know too much because that would keep us from doing.
Mm, yeah, that unknown that sort of holds a lot of people back. I feel like most people, they want to know what they're walking into, what they're stepping into. But the move that you guys made, it's like it doesn't matter how much you prepare or how much research you do. It's such a massive unknown. And when I was watching your videos and following the journey, I had this level of anxiety that I've never really had before because I'm not a very anxious person. I don't struggle too much with anxiety at all. But when you're
Yeah.
going through the moving process and you have to get like paperwork for the dog, and you had to get like the moving truck, and there's all these boxes everywhere, I was like, oh my gosh, this video is like anxiety ridden. Like I'm I'm struggling watching this because
Yeah.
I've been someone who's been moving around a lot recently, and I can totally relate to that sentiment. But you were moving countries, like countries where they speak different languages, where you need different, I don't know, documentation or passports or visas, or I don't even know where to start with this type of stuff. And I used to complain just moving cities in Canada, and you're moving like all to completely different countries in a different continent. And I thought it was wild. And it was it was really interesting because most people who normally do this type of thing are a lot younger. Maybe they're trying to like experiment in life. They haven't settled down. And I really like this description that you had of a golden cage of what you felt like your property was like. And I found that, wow, that's like such an interesting like analogy to make, where you have this beautiful home, this property, this forever house in this like perfect location, but the kids are gone, and you don't absolutely love where you are, and maybe now it's time to make a big move. But I feel like a lot of people would get that paralysis by analysis, or whatever, analysis by paralysis, or whatever the saying is, and that they'd probably be too afraid to overcome that initial resistance and make that huge change in their life. And so that's something that I find very refreshing about your videos. It's like this wild journey that you're on, and I'm always wondering, like, where is it leading to? Where is it leading to next? Is there somewhere after France, or is this the final destination?
You know, for now, France is it. I said
Okay.
that in a video. For now. I mean, look, we don't know, and we want to leave things open in our minds. We want to settle. We want to settle into a future home and plant ourselves, get our lives back in terms of a routine. We're really craving that. But ask me in 5 years, 10 years. I don't know what we might want to do, but that's kind of the fun of it. It's opened up sort of a mindset of, let's not lock ourselves into anything, because we don't know, and there's fun to be had. Now, as you get older, it gets more difficult. I would imagine we're going to find a home base and probably stay there, but it doesn't negate now being in Europe, being able to go to other countries, and maybe eventually getting. We want to get a place in Paris, a small place, so we can hop back and forth. If we're able to, if the finances work out. But beyond that, yeah, I don't know what the plans are. It's just um, I want to remain as unpredictable as possible for myself, for us, for my stories. You know, it's been quite a journey, and I think once you crack that lid open and you allow for this kind of crazy stuff to happen. And again, it's not like we're trying to be crazy all the time. We want to settle, but you know, you could still then have adventures. I mean, you can define what adventure means to you and how you're gonna, you know, sort of consume the world, take it in. For us, it's travel. We want to do a lot of travel once we settle in. So
That's awesome. Do you and your wife speak French?
we, yes and no. Uh, we're studying it, so I could say that now we're able to somehow, on a very basic level, communicate. We know way more than we're able to execute, if you will. So you know, we're on the apps. We're on ChatGPT is amazing for learning language, by the way. So just using tools to learn, um, and you know, committed to becoming proficient. So it's been, I would say, 6 months of learning, and it's going to take, you know, it's going to take a couple of years to get good enough. If we're both bilingual, we have Spanish to help us in the process of learning French, which helps to some degree. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's a matter of time.
That's awesome. Yeah, the learning different languages is so cool. In Canada, French is our second language, and I am abysmal at it. I am absolutely terrible.
Mm,
And
mm.
when I moved to this new house last year, I moved purposely within walking distance from a French immersion school, as I want my daughter and my son to be completely fluent in French and embrace a second language that I sort of regret not taking. Because in Canada, all of our signs, everything's in English and French, right? Like when you exit the highway, it says exit, sortie. And I was, for whatever reason, I hated other languages. I didn't enjoy learning French. But now I regret that later in life. I regret that I only know English because my wife is bilingual, so are like my parents, but all I know is English. And it kind of sucks, right? And I think that was maybe one of the reasons why I was initially drawn to Nathan's channel, where he talked about learning Italian in like 7 days or something like that, which I thought was crazy
Yeah.
because my dad is half Italian, so I can totally relate to that. And so the French thing is, I think it's super cool because just being able to move to another country with a whole different culture and a whole different language, like if you know any French at all, you have such like a better time of assimilating to that culture or that society. I think that's like that's so cool. And I I'm probably not brave enough to ever make like a change that drastic in my life. I'd probably be too afraid, and I'd have these thoughts in my mind like, oh, I can't move to France. I don't know any of the language or any of the culture or any of the traditions. And I think that resistance would probably come up in my life. However, I want to give that opportunity to for my kids that hopefully if they learn French, maybe it'll help them get into a different language. As I've heard, if you're bilingual, it's easier to learn a third language. Is that true?
Um, you know, I mean, I think it depends on which languages you know. Because if you know one of the Romance languages like Spanish, it leads into Italian, Portuguese, French a lot more easily. Um, I think you're See, I learned both languages when I was a kid. You know, I was raised speaking Spanish and then came to the US, or went to the US at this point, when I was 11. So I absorbed English. And so it was all like when I was young. I think if you master a language as an adult, it probably does open the door to you as an adult, you know, knowing how to pick up yet another language. So it's kind of what happened with Nathan. You know, he learned English, obviously. Then he knew Spanish from growing up with us. Then went to Argentina and became fluent. Um, Between those two languages, he had gone to France for a year in high school and learned French. And so it's like it became progressively easier for him to learn languages. Um, I think when you're younger, it's a little easier, But I think that if you, as an adult, if you were to learn French and got into that mindset of absorbing the language and finding tools and ways that work best for you, then I think a third language would be um, easier or not hard for you. But you have to now at your age overcome those kind of mental constructs like we are for absorbing a new language, and it takes repetition. It takes understanding how you learn best, really.
True. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just something that, because I would love to travel more in the future. Hopefully, like when the career maybe gets a little bit more successful, or maybe I can quit my day job, which I've been dreaming about for many years. But is there, maybe aside from France, is there a favorite or best country that you visited?
um that's for me, I could tell you as a visitor what I've enjoyed. I enjoyed Ecuador a
Oh,
lot.
really?
Quito, in particular, that's where we were filming years ago. That trip that I talked about in my latest video. I thought that's the beautiful city. The modern side, the historic side, the food, the people. Now, I don't know what it would be like to live there, right? It's one thing to visit, it's another to live in a place. Iceland was exceptional. I don't think I could live there, but it's a lovely country. So, from the impact of the nature and visiting, um, you know, look at us. We thought Portugal was going to be a good fit, and we had to live there and experience it to know that energetically it wasn't right for us until we came to France and realized that this was a great fit. So, um, ultimately, you have to visit places, you have to feel them, you have to go, could I learn their language? How good is their food to me? How do I like different aspects of this culture? That it becomes enough connecting points that you say, yeah, that's somewhere that I want to fit in and assimilate and what have you. But where have you been? What countries have you been that have maybe resonated for you?
So I've traveled pretty frequently. I'm pretty lucky because my parents took me all over the place. So I grew up in Bermuda, on an island as a kid, and I came to Canada when I was, how old are you when you go into kindergarten? 4 or 5.
Yeah,
So, anyways, I
something like
grew
that.
up on an island. My younger brother was born in Bermuda, and we sort of grew up in Canada by Toronto. And I've been all over Europe, some parts of Asia, the Caribbean, but never to South America. Maybe that's why the Ecuador um, mention was I found super interesting. But also, I have, like all people, you have like a bias towards your home nation. And of course, like when I went to Austria and Italy, where my dad is from, I absolutely loved it there. It was super nice. Austria is a strange country. It's sort of like a touristy type country where they have laws where you have to have flowers on all of your windowsills. So like
Oh,
the homes are
wow.
like beautiful. There's like flowers everywhere. And I was like, what is all this? And my dad's like, oh, it's part of like the not the tourism type of thing. They want to have this like appealing, beautiful nature in this country. So I found Austria really, really nice. And then also from my mom's side, when I went to visit Japan a couple years ago, that was like eye opening. I have never seen a country as unique as Japan. Everything they do there, it's so different. Like everything is so different. Even like a restaurant, you go to a restaurant like to have a meal, there's no servers. There's no server staff to like, oh, here's your table, I'm your waitress, would you like something to drink, here's the menu. There's none of that. There's a vending machine outside the front door, and you pay for your meal, and it spits out all these little tickets. So it's like, oh, I want this rice, double meat, this sauce, and it spits out these little paper square things. And then you go inside and you put it on this counter where it's a strange like door that sort of opens up, and then you just like put the tickets there, and then a hand comes and it takes it,
Oh, how
and then
funny.
I guess it goes to like the chef, right? And so it's very strange. There's like no interaction with people. And I guess they just make your food, that little door will open up, and then bam, your food kind of comes out. But it's also very efficient because you're only paying the people in the kitchen making the food, right? So your overhead is not as high. And even like if you want to rent a bicycle, this thing comes out of the ground, and like it's just such a bizarre country. Like everything there is so futuristic and so different. And so I wonder sometimes, is that like my personal bias because of where my mom is from? And I don't know. It's interesting because I think about this sort of question all the time: travel. Like if I could leave Canada, like where would I move to? Would I move to Europe? Would I explore South America? Would I go to Asia somewhere? Like I have no idea, but I find the exercise of going through that thought really exhilarating and a lot of fun. So that's why when I see you and your wife make this like massive leap, I'm like, man, you guys did it. That's so cool. Like I can't believe like you've just got up, sold all your stuff, and like flown all the way across the world. And I think this is why your channel sort of blew up, I guess you could say, is that there is this authenticity, this uniqueness that is unique to you guys. Like no one that I've really seen creates content kind of like this. And I find it incredibly refreshing. And I love like the mystery. I'm like, okay, where are you? What's gonna happen next? Like, I remember that one video you lost your passport, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like
Yeah,
craziness, right?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. I'm episodic in that way. I like episodes of our lives, and I like cliffhangers because life is not always resolved, and so it just kind of has that. It ends, but it doesn't really, and so um, yeah. I mean, that's how it's been. So, uh, but yeah, we're getting out there, and it's or we've gotten out there, and it's evolved in its own interesting ways. And I'm really glad that it's resonated with people. It's been quite a thing to get that kind of response back from viewers. So
Yeah, that must be awesome, right? It's like such a nice feeling when you get those super engaging, positive comments. But speaking of YouTube, what is like, what's the best type of advice that you would give someone who is thinking about starting a YouTube channel?
it would be what I said before. I mean, if you're gonna do something that you love, that you're passionate about. And I know this has become cliched a little bit, but if you're not doing it for that reason, to be as authentic and true to yourself as you can be, then you're playing somebody else's game. And that doesn't last. That doesn't have longevity. You know, um, if you're going to play the game, then just know that you're playing the game. If you're going to just do it for shock value, for views, what have you, then that's your choice. But you have to enjoy doing that. It has to be something that is meaningful to you in some way. And so the other thing is that you have to just try not to have expectations. I mean, it's really hard as human beings. It's hard not to have expectations, but try to let it be its own thing and to flourish in any way that it's going to. What happened to me, I couldn't have predicted. I couldn't have predicted a year and a half later the size of the channel, the views, the resonating with people. You don't know. It's a big unknown. You can only do you the best you can, and if it clicks, great. If not, you have to learn to live with that. And again, I mentioned before, I go video to video. I don't know how the next one's going to do. I don't know if I can make a living from this continually. It's been an amazing ride. I'll take it as long as it's working, but I need to also be aware that it may not be for years to come. And that has to be okay. A lot of this not controlling reality, if it's not panning out the way you want, has to be okay. You have to somehow make friends with it. So
Hmm. Yeah, because I get this question all the time. People always are like, "Hey, Derek, I'm thinking about starting a YouTube channel, or I want to create a YouTube channel, or I'm going to start one next month. And I'm always like, man, if this is something that you really want to do, like you just got to do it. That very first video you make is always the hardest, because there's all this negative thoughts in your mind. There's all this like confusion. There's all this doubt where you're doubting yourself. Like, is anyone going to watch this? Is anyone even going to care? And I
Yeah.
feel like there's so many people out there that want to create a YouTube video, but all these negative thoughts just hold them back. And so I also kind of echo that same sentiment that you just said, like, do something that you love, show your authentic self, because then it's not going to feel like a job, or it's not going to feel like work. And I know too many people that create a YouTube video because they want to make Google AdSense, they want to get brand deals, they want to get sponsors, they want to make passive income. And so I feel like those people are getting into it for the wrong reason, because our journeys, especially yours and mine, are very, very different. They're almost like polar opposites, and you can go through long periods of time where you are getting no views analytically in the algorithm, or whatever you want to call it. Where my channel, for example, I started posting consistently in June of 2019. So next month we're going to approach the 4-year anniversary of my channel, and I got 4,000 subscribers. And so I asked people, like, look, I put in 30 to 35 hours a week, every week, into this thing that I love to do. And I've made only 4,000 subscribers in 4 years. And to a lot of people, that will seem like failure, right? Like, people are like, why are you wasting your time on this stupid thing? You're spending all this time making videos and doing podcasts and doing live streams for what, 4,000 subscribers? That's it? You're making like $1 or $2 a day in Google AdSense? But I'm like, you need to look at it from a different lens. For me, this conversation we're having, this is play. This is fun. Like, I'm engaged. I love it. This is like enjoyable for me, right? This is the passion that I have for this content creation stuff. So it's easy for me to keep going into year 4, 5, 6, when, the views aren't as high as I would like them to be, for example. But if you enter content creation with the right mindset, I think it's easily one of the best decisions that I've ever made, and I'm sure you can relate to this. Like, just I'm so thankful today that I started my channel when I did, because it's made me such a better person, and I just absolutely love the whole journey up until this point. It's incredible.
Yeah. 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 I agree with everything. Yeah. I mean, look at your smile. You are enjoying what you're doing. It's still fun, and as long as you keep that alive, that makes all the difference. Um, and when it doesn't, you'll find something that nourishes you. I mean, that's the thing. That's the important thing to keep in mind. Do something that's nourishing you. And I don't know the future of beneath the surface, but I have to keep an open mind of what that could be or couldn't be, or it's just keeping sort of that open mindedness around letting it evolve the way that it's going to. Um, I've talked before about things having sort of a shelf life; they expire, and you have to be at peace when something is done and you know it, and it's time to move on. So for now, it's working. For now, it's been a good ride. As long as I have something that I want to say that is satisfying to me, right? Because that's where it starts. Then I'll keep it going.
Do you have any other future plans or side projects in the works, like maybe a newsletter, a book, podcast, anything like that?
I don't. I don't. With all the hopping around and administrative stuff and just our lives the way that they've been for the past year, it's enough to try to pump out a video a month, at this point. So I thought briefly about a book. We thought we've had different ideas for different products and things we could do together, maybe, but nothing that I can really put my attention on at this point. And I don't want to get to the point where it's just so overloaded and I'm doing so much that I'm not enjoying it. So I do live that way. I've actually been like that always. It's if it's too much and it's your head is cluttered and you have so many responsibilities, that it stops being fun in that sense, then I don't want it, you know? So there are ideas, nothing yet to be implemented or released, certainly, but stuff that we'll explore, you know, as time goes on.
Mm. Yeah, because the business side of YouTube is something that I'm also passionate about. I love just business in general. It's another like something that's another spark that I have inside of me.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
also struggle with this concept of balancing out diversifying your work and doing what you love. Because especially with YouTube, like your channel could take a hit one day, maybe it's not making enough income to live the type of lifestyle you're living. And so
Right.
general advice is to diversify, right? Maybe have like a newsletter, maybe create an online course that can bring income, have like a bunch of different digital products. However, I struggle with that because like I also want to keep it enjoyable at the same time. I don't want to just be forced to diversify myself and spread myself too thin over too many mediums. So like for example, I have the main channel, I have this podcast, I have a third like tiny YouTube channel where I make like these quick 2-minute videos with no editing at all. I have a newsletter, and I would also love to do like a book or a course someday. But then also it's like people tell me, "Oh, post your stuff on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, like
No,
it's
it's exhausting. It really is.
yeah, right." So I don't know, do you struggle with that like being on all the platforms at once or trying to
I
diversify yourself too thin?
I only announce my video on Instagram, LinkedIn. Instagram will publish to Facebook. Like I say, for 2, 3 days, I do engagement. I find it uh, just so energy draining, you know, to keep up with all that. I do photography, and I used to post more of that on Instagram, but it's I'm also older. I'm not like, younger people who are just able to or want to do this all the time. I don't know how effective it is in the end, but yeah, you can expose yourself constantly and go nuts. I don't want my life to be about that, So, um, it's not a lot of work around social media. I would not touch TikTok. I don't care for stories. It's my stuff is slow cooked video content. You know, what I mean, it's like I do one video a month, and that's just how it is. It's just how I prefer to do it. And I did a course that went out recently on collaborative trip planning. That's on Bright Trip. That's out there, and some people have enjoyed it. But that happened pretty much before the channel started, overlapping a little bit. It took a lot of work. I don't know if I have the energy for another course in the future, but it's again, it's about what you love and what you're willing to put hours and hours into. And for me, it's my monthly videos are where the focus is, and hoping every month that enough people will watch them and enjoy them. So
How do your peers feel about your channel? Like brothers, sisters, cousins, wife, like people your age. How do they feel about your YouTube channel?
I don't know how much my family watches my stuff, to be
Oh,
honest.
okay.
Yeah, my parents, my sister, I'm not sure that they really watch the stuff. I don't talk to a lot of old friends. I'm very nuclear in that sense with my wife and kids in our world. Um, I think I've surprised some friends from high school and college with having a channel. A couple responded, "Oh, you have sponsors now." And I think
Athletic
that bothered
Greens.
them a little bit. I'm like, I'm sorry if it bothers you, but um, surprisingly, it's not this kind of like feedback, like old friends showing up to say, "Hey, oh, look at what you're doing." I think some people are probably watching and not commenting, but it's been pretty self-contained. It's been just, what you see in comments on YouTube or Instagram. People around the world who, a lot in the US, obviously, who are having similar plans, who are in the same age group. So, yeah, as far as my circle, there's not like any kind of what I also would think would be more feedback from people I know, but it just hasn't happened that way. It's been mostly strangers who are more interested in what I'm doing.
Okay, that's amazing. I've
Yeah.
actually had a completely different experience. I've oh man, I've got too much feedback from my peers,
Ah.
mostly, and even my parents too. Which is mostly negative feedback is what I've unfortunately received, which is kind of weird because I generally talk about like self improvement type topics, like ideas that can help people's lives, removing your addiction. So like I'm generally coming from a place of positivity, right? But it's interesting because I receive a lot of feedback talking about like, why do you share these stories about doing drugs and gambling away money? And
Mm,
why do you show all
mm.
these stupid morning routine stuff you do? And you're too
Wow.
opinionated, right? So I get this like kind of negative response from my work, which kind of sucks because there's been times where my parents have called me up and they voiced their opinion and concerns like, hey, I didn't like what you said in this video, and I'm like, oh no.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so it's tough, but I have a really good relationship with my parents, um yeah, but it's okay. It's just an interesting experience that
I,
I've
I've
had.
worried about that before. Like, are people, any family member, is anyone going to see something they don't like? In a way, it's good that they're not watching, I guess, or chiming in too heavily. There's a way that I want them to, and a way that it's kind of cool that they're not. Um, but a stranger and talking about these sort of negative comments. This guy was semi-negative. He told me to tone it down. He saw my last video and he was like saying, "You're likable. We love you, Josh, but tone it down, man," and all in caps.
Tone it
I'm like,
down.
tone down my sharing of my personal life, and because I got deep into some stuff in my latest video, and I'm like, do you think for a moment that? And I don't interact. I don't engage with these people. I have tried in the past, but I don't do it anymore. It's like, do you think that that comment is going to make me stop what I'm doing? I mean, this is the juice. This is the richness of my life, you know. But again, you're triggering people, not always in the way you want, and that's okay. He left a comment. He stimulated the algorithm, and in some way in the end I have to be thankful. So but people telling you to tone it down, I don't know what your family and friends are saying, but it's like you realize that it's their triggers, it's their discomfort. You still get
Yeah.
to say what you want. I mean, that's how it is.
Hey,
So I
well
hope it's
said.
not stopping you in any way.
No, it's not. It's not. But that's funny. Hey, Josh, let's wrap this up. This was an awesome conversation. Let's tell the people who's listening, watching this, where people can find your work.
Well, I think if you search on Beneath the Surface on YouTube, you tend to see something of mine relatively at the top, because there was a movie, apparently a bad shark movie,
Really?
called Beneath the Surface. You're going to run into that inevitably. But um, yeah, if you see a photo of me looking down at my camera, that's the little icon. And then if you do the same, I believe if you go to Instagram, um, you can see some of my photography there. Typically, what I end up doing is promoting my YouTube videos. So you might as well just head over to YouTube, and that's where my main stuff is anyway. So that's the way to find me.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Arik, I'll leave links in the description down below to Josh's work. Once again, that's Beneath the Surface on YouTube. Highly recommend his channel. Amazing cinematography, storytelling, visuals, B-roll, just super high quality videos that I couldn't recommend more, and extremely happy that your channel is growing. So
Yeah.
everyone check it out in the description, and thanks again, Josh, for being on the
Thank you so
podcast.
much, Derek. It was awesome. Appreciate it.
All right, cool. All right, guys. See ya. Peace.